good evening, and thank you for joining us this evening for Braving the Cold for our fourth and final lecture for 2024. My name is Jonathan Rudder. I'm the director of the Rourke, and I want to thank Mike Christensen for being one of our quarterly lecture sponsors, our featured sponsor this evening. For those of you who weren't aware, we do offer sponsorship opportunities for activities like this. Naturally, every dollar we receive helps to support a variety of programming opportunities and events here at the museum. But if there are particular things we do that are near and dear to your heart, we do offer sponsorship as an opportunity. I also want to thank our supporting members. Without you, we wouldn't still be here after nearly 65 years. Finally, I want to thank the various grant entities that help to provide us funding, the Minnesota State Arts Board, the Lake Region Arts Council, and the Arts Partnership. In times like these, it's important that our elected officials are aware that organizations like this and all of those throughout our community rely upon public dollars. So do let them know that this sort of activity is something that you enjoy seeing in our community. Tonight, it's my great pleasure to welcome Erin Shapiro, the president and CEO of the Plains Art Museum. For those of you who don't know, Erin received her MFA at the Cranbrook Academy, which the rankings go up and down from year to year, but I think it's typically one of the top 5 studio art programs for MFAs in the country. In addition to that, she has been all across this country working as a curator and arts administrator, so she is uniquely qualified to speak on the subject of tonight's lecture, New Trends in Museum Exhibitions. Without further ado, let us all welcome Erin Shapiro.
Jonathan, that was a very kind intro. I said I was going to keep it on the stand, but I'm actually going to hold it now that I'm standing up here. So thanks for coming, everybody. This is a really nice crowd. And once again, thank you for braving the cold. It is freezing out there, I can say that. I appreciate everybody being here, and I'm really looking forward to kind of delving into a few different themes that I've seen in exhibitions that are emerging really within, I'd say, the last 10 to 15 years. And I've broken it out into sort of 3 big trends, and I've paired that with a few bigger exhibitions that I've worked on at different museums. As Jonathan said, I started off actually as a studio artist. So I did study sculpture at Cranbrook, and actually was a working artist for several years after graduating. So I worked in the performance art realm and was working with different galleries in New York, Ohio, and Michigan primarily, and really wasn't thinking too much about museum work, to be perfectly honest. I was very much like, I'm going to be a starving artist, I am going to do it, it's going to be great. It wasn't, and so I pivoted, and that's how I first got into museum work. And so, when I was in grad school, I was working at the Cranbrook Art Museum with their collection and learning more about how they put shows together. And after graduating, moved directly to Cleveland. And when I say I've worked pretty much every position at a museum, it's the truth. My very first official museum job was as a train operator for a children's choo-choo train at the Cleveland Botanical Garden. If you really look, there's a clip of me on YouTube wearing a conductor's hat and taking kids around on this little train track. So started off, and now I'm here, so it's been quite the journey over the years, but it's been a really wonderful journey. I'm very passionate about art of all different disciplines, and I'm really passionate about accessibility and how we disseminate themes in art and share it with the public. And I think, art museums, unfortunately, over the years do have a reputation sometimes of being elitist, of being hard to access, of being more academic. And of course, when you're thinking about art and sharing it with the public, you want to be able to hit on all of the themes that the artist is talking about it. You want to connect it to social dialogues and things of that nature. But really, I think what's emerged as a top priority for museums worldwide is this idea of accessibility and meeting the audience where they are. Because we're not going to be able to sustain and to continue to grow if people aren't understanding what they're seeing or if they don't feel welcome in a space. And so we've really seen a thrust to make exhibitions more interactive, more engaging, and easier for people to understand. And there's been a lot of creativity, I think, that's gone into these trends, into making museums more welcoming for the public. And before I sort of get into the slides and talk about specific exhibitions, I want to address the three main themes I'm talking about. So what you'll see is more community engagement with exhibitions, and that can look very different depending on the museum or the show that we're talking about. Artificial intelligence and the use of technology in art, so think things like Beyond Monet, Beyond Van Gogh, and this usage of AI to enhance the viewer experience. And then this idea of health and wellness and really connecting the arts to healing, to creating better outcomes for people's mental health, for their healing times if they're recovering from an injury or an illness, and also this idea of using art as a means to combat loneliness. So those are three main areas that I have really noticed museums leaning into over the past decade or so. And I want to show some concrete examples. And the first exhibition I'm starting off with is Rebecca Louise Law's show Awakening, and this was up at the Honolulu Museum of Art from 2022 to 2023. And when I was at the Honolulu Museum of Art, I served as their interpretive resource person, which was a brand new department for the museum. And just for some context, I'd been in Ohio for about a decade pre-pandemic. The museum I was at shut down. I just had my son, didn't know what we were doing, and we ended up moving to Hawaii. I had never been there before. It was quite the adventure. And this was the first show I was really tasked with working on. And as somebody working in interpretive resources, I was really the liaison between the curatorial and the education departments. So thinking about how you bridge the gap between putting up a show and how you then disseminate the information and share it with the public. And Rebecca was a really wonderful artist to work with because her work is very much rooted in this idea of community involvement and community engagement. And this is also some publicity for Plains Art Museum because we are bringing Rebecca's work here in 2026. So this is a little bit of a sneak peek of what you guys can come see at Plains in the nearest future. So Rebecca is an artist. She lives in Wales, and she creates large-scale installation work out of natural materials and botanicals. And I'm seeing how I can get the next slide. There we go. So there's just a different shot of the show at Honolulu. So all of these works are made out of literally millions of flowers that she has dried and preserved over the span of her career. And she's a mid-career artist at this point, so she's been working on this body of work for about 20 years at this point. So she has her collection of botanical materials, and I'm just going to go through some images, and she threads them together to create these really ethereal installations that fill the space with this very meditative type of aesthetic imagery. They're all very carefully preserved, and they all have different meanings, both to the artists and to the communities that they represent, because this piece grows with each place that it is installed at. So, for example, the piece that came to Honolulu was composed of flowers that were collected in Germany, in Florida, there was an installation in Ohio, really global, and then it came to Honolulu and people added their own dried materials to the exhibition while they were there. And that's a picture of the director of the museum in the piece, which gives you an idea of scale. So obviously, it's a stunning work. It's hard to really convey it without seeing it in person. But you can kind of get a sense of the delicacy and how she's really woven these flowers together to create what she calls live paintings. And you'll notice here too that there's bits of plastic that are included in this installation in Honolulu. And that's because when Rebecca came, she noticed all the plastic that had washed up on the shore of the beach. And that had such a profound impact on her that for the first time she decided to incorporate some of that into the body of work. I'm going to show a quick video just to give context of how she uses her process, because the pieces really come together with community involvement, as I've been saying. So when Rebecca comes into a community to put her show together, she actually asks people and residents to collect flowers, to collect dried materials that represent the place the land, and then she incorporates that into the piece. So it's a really engaged process where community members get to know the artist, get to feel like they're part of the work, and from there it just creates this sort of really symbiotic type of relationship. And this is a touch screen, there we go. All right. And this is about a 6-minute clip, and I think it's just the easiest way for you guys to sort of be grounded in her practice and understanding of what she does. We'll let this load. There we go. And Rebecca does make a video for each exhibition and place it's installed. So we will have our own Plains Art Museum, Fargo, North Dakota, Moorhead, Minnesota video with her show at Plains. Is there a way to get sound on here, Jonathan? No, you're fine. We have subtitles, so that helps. I will talk through while we're watching. Sound is not totally essential for this. You're starting to see some of her working process here. So it's obviously it's shipping, it's collecting. We've been getting a lot of questions about how she gets the flowers from one point to the other. The answer is something called coffin boxes that she actually stores the flowers in, and it allows her to move them around. So these are just some install shots so you can see the scale of the piece. This will be going in the 3rd floor of Plains Art Museum, so up on our 3rd floor gallery. And the clip I really wanted to show is the community involvement portion, and I can just kind of talk through it. But you're seeing here that Rebecca comes to a place and she works with the local residents to really understand their concerns, both ecologically, environmentally, and also this idea of community, of what it means to be community. And Hawaii posed some really unique challenges because it is a very much a melting pot of different cultures. So there's the Native Hawaiian element that she wanted to represent with this, and then also a very large Japanese population, and then of course other groups as well. So when she was making this piece, she was being very sensitive to these different cultural groups, and it was really a means for dialogue and for engagement in a different kind of way. And you can see here, this is what a community session looks like while people are working on her exhibition. So people actually come in and she hosts 2 to 3 week workshops where they can come and they learn how to use her working methodologies to create different strands that hang as part of the installation. So many hands make all of her pieces. It's really, truly a group effort. And this was so special in Hawaii because it was a means to engage underserved populations that often don't feel comfortable in the art museum space. And unfortunately, in Oahu, a lot of those are Native Hawaiian groups that do not feel welcome in the museum spheres. And so her work really was intentionally put forth to help engage these groups and bring them into the museum and make them feel like they were part of this community and part of the museum sphere as well. It's a very time-consuming process, and it forms deep connections within the community. So Rebecca was actually here in Fargo this past summer, and she met with 19 community groups in Fargo Moorhead just to start learning our interests as a group and learning about the ecology of the area as well. And she will be back in May to do another round of group sessions too. So if anybody here is interested in meeting Rebecca or participating, please let me know. It is absolutely open to everybody. So you're seeing here what it looks like to collect and to harvest the plants. We're in the process of setting up a space where we can collect flowers at Plains Art Museum and dry them so that we have a good backlog of materials for her to work with when she's here on site as well. So what will happen and what's so connecting about this type of art too is not only do you have this community engagement portion where people are working on the piece quite literally and helping to create it and to install it, but it also travels. So we are getting the body of work that was created in Hawaii along with all of the other areas that she visited and communities that she worked with. And then we will be adding to it and that will travel on to the next destination too. So in a way it becomes sort of this chain of communities that are all connected through this artwork, which I think is really beautiful and really special. As you can see now, here is some of the gathering that was happening of the plastic shards on the beach. So this was, Rebecca actually moved her entire family to Hawaii for about 2 months to create this work, and really created long-lasting relationships as a result of that. And these types of engaged exhibitions are becoming more and more popular in the museum realm as museums seek to engage not just people who are interested in the arts, but people who are interested in community. And you'll hear me use the word community quite a bit when talking about art, not just with this show specifically, but art as a whole, because I really do think art is about community, and everybody, for it to be successful, should have a stake in it. And that's why I think this show in particular is so incredibly successful, because people do feel like they're a part of it. You don't need to be an artist. You don't even need to have a strong interest in art necessarily, but this idea of bringing people in and giving them that ownership is so important. One of the other reasons I wanted to bring Rebecca here is because she works with underserved communities, so those who are neurodivergent on the autism spectrum. She works with seniors who are in memory care. She works with those who are low vision or blind, and she brings them into the fold. She's got a great team that travels with her and helps to do those types of community sessions. And that's really important to her too, to use art as a means for healing, art as a means for giving people something to do. She said some of the best groups that she have worked with are the seniors in memory care, actually, because they really take the time, and you can see them connect with the art even if they're no longer able to connect in real life the way that they used to. And I'm gonna go back to the presentation now. So that's a very quick summary of Rebecca Louise Law, and like I said, she'll be at Plains in May doing community sessions, and then her exhibition will actually open in April of 2026. So we've got some lead time, but this is going to be really a 3-year relationship with the artist and then with the installation, and then it will continue on as it travels throughout different countries. I think it's slated to go back to Germany actually after it's here with us. So really I'm excited to make us part of this larger international conversation too, and involve the community in that capacity. So I think Rebecca is just such a strong example of how an artist can come in from somewhere really remote. She literally lives in Snowdonia. It's about as remote as it could possibly be, and come into these communities and make real impact and real connection and bring people together and create relationships amongst the community that hadn't already existed. So she's a wonderful example. And now I'm going to switch gears to a very different type of engaging exhibition. And this was a show that I worked on at the Taubman Museum of Art in Roanoke, Virginia. So in Appalachia, also more of a remote community. This show was a very big deal for them to get. They're actually all works from the Joslyn Museum of Art in Omaha, Nebraska. So the Joslyn Museum of Art has an encyclopedic collection of works, so from antiquity to contemporary art. And they were closed for the past several years for major renovations. And at that time, they traveled a portion of their permanent collection, which had never traveled before. Only 2 spaces got it. It was the Taubman Museum of Art, and then it went to the Philbrook, and that was it. It will not travel again. The Joslyn just recently reopened, and everything's back on view. So this was a really incredible opportunity for people in Southwest Virginia to see true masterpieces, a level of art that generally does not travel. So once again, thinking about access to these types of painters, to these types of names. And this is just a sampling. The show itself was called Titian to Monet, so it started in early Renaissance and went up through French Impressionism. So we just have a sampling of some of the works. We have a really wonderful Titian, a Maria van Oosterwijk, who is a Dutch still life painter. We have a great Renoir, a Monet, a Jerome, and then a Rembrandt here. So it was a very far-ranging exhibition with a lot of different themes, but very much rooted in this idea of what people might expect if they go to an art museum, if you will, the masters. And the director, Cindy, really wanted to make this even more engaging, as if the art wasn't enough. And I will tell you, this was a blockbuster exhibition. We were getting upwards of 300 to 400 people a day for this for the last month, because everyone wanted to see these works while they were in the state of Virginia. But to make them come alive, we did 2 different things. One involved AI, and the other involved interactive stations for people to engage in the gallery. So this was one of the biggest projects I've ever worked on, and it was actually creating a Beyond Monet type experience with the works that I just showed you. So I've never actually been to a Beyond Monet or Beyond Van Gogh, but they're the large-scale interactive exhibitions where the actual artwork isn't there, but they're blowing up these paintings, digitizing them, and making them come to life. So things move. They're very much sort of that holographic type of experience. So we partnered with Virginia Tech to do that here in Virginia, and this is just a still image of what it looked like trying to sort of score where the interactive was going to go and what that was going to look like. And here is an image of it when it was actually operational. So you can see the Monet here on the wall. And it was really incredible. People were absolutely blown away by it because it hadn't been done before like this, especially on this scale. The Taubman's a regional museum. You know, we weren't talking $1 million plus budget. We were talking graduate students working with museum staff to try to pull this together. So it's something I'm very proud we were able to do. And I've got a video, sort of a behind the scenes, so you can get a sense of what it looks like to pull something like this together. And the tech side was all Virginia Tech. That was not the museum. I think we're gonna get a little bit of an ad. Not too long. So this shows you kind of the software and the behind the scenes look of what it looks like to put this together. We had 16 projectors in different parts of the room, and they were using, I mean, I can't actually break down the tech for you guys, but it was very cool. And this was about a year-long process where we were going back and forth, deciding what parts of the painting were going to be animated, and making those decisions to create sort of a loose narrative around that as well. And I do have the actual footage of what that looked like too, which I'm going to show you now. It's gonna make me go back here. You guys get to see Rebecca's work again. There we go. And we're not going to watch the whole thing because it's 14 minutes, and I have seen it more times than I can say at this point. But I want you guys to sort of see what you can do. And it was both rudimentary and advanced at the same time, but the opportunity to really sit and take it in was really special. So it started off, let the internet catch up. We had a gentleman named Gordon Marsh from one of the local colleges compose a score specifically for this too, so it had music. It was truly that type of immersive experience. It's thinking. So this is actually at the end of the exhibition. So people went through, they saw these masterpieces, and we actually designed the gallery to mimic the time periods that the works were from. So when you got into you know, the Renaissance works, we had the walls painted accurate colors, we had salon style hanging in some of the other gallery spaces. We installed sconces, changed the lighting so it wasn't necessarily your stark type of gallery lighting, but it had more of that intimate type of feel. And that was modeled after the Virginia Museum of Fine Arts show of Mary Cassatt's work, where they also did that style of immersive installation where they had parlors set up. They really actually referenced the domestic space that you see in a lot of her paintings. So going through the exhibition, you felt like you were in a living room, or you felt like you were in an outdoor garden space as you were looking at some of the earlier Impressionist works. And that pairing of changing the gallery, so it's not just the white walls, but it's actually reflective of the time period, reflective of the work, was really impactful as well. And we did borrow some of those concepts for this show too. I don't think this video wants to play. I'll give it one more shot and then I will move on. You can sort of see it if I fast forward through it. It's doing that for me. You guys get the idea. Basically the walls were all immersed in this different tech imagery, and you could see the paintings sort of slowly come alive. So like with the Titian piece, the falcon would actually fly around the room. The Monet piece, there's two little girls in the background and they walked through the field of flowers. I mean, it was really, really neat, and it blew people away. It was something they'd never seen before. And like I said, it hadn't been done that way before. And even though it was a little rough, I mean, like I said, we weren't talking special effects, blockbuster video. It was different and it was special, and they understood that this was a new sort of cutting edge technology, and it really was met with a lot of excitement, a lot of energy, and it was a special experience for people. So we would bring them through the exhibit, and then we would end with this, what we were calling sketching station. And this is also an example of an interactive. So we created these 3 distinct sketching stations to help people break down and understand the main concepts of the show, because Titian to Monet is a huge span in art history, and it's really hard to break down that information into really digestible bites. At Plains we talk a lot about writing all of our exhibition text really at that 4th grade middle school reading level. We want things to be understandable. That's a challenge sometimes when you're trying to get through early Renaissance works, Dutch still life, and then all the way up through Impressionism. That's a lot. It's a lot for anybody, even art history people. And so our ultimate concept was to create these sketching stations that kind of replicated the time periods and allowed people to engage. So this is a quick shot of a bottega. So Renaissance workshops were called bottegas at the time. They were really based on this idea of a master teaching apprentices their skills and their craft. And so we set up these different areas for people to sketch, so to do figure drawing, and we had easels right in the gallery spaces, and it was decorated to look not exactly accurate, but you got there a little bit. We actually worked with Black Dog Salvage, if anybody has seen Salvage Dogs on TLC or Discovery Channel, I can't remember what channel it's on, but they loaned us everything, which was great. And then we had an outdoor impressionist sketching station with fountains so people could practice in plein air painting, and we also had a Dutch still life set up, and we had it out of the climate controlled galleries, but we had like moldering fruit and vegetables and things that changed over the course of the exhibition, which was a lot of fun too. And people would just come sketch, and you would walk through and you'd see them sitting and sketching and doing their thing, and then we had a little gallery space where they could put up their artwork as well. So that was a nice way to really break down the themes and make it more approachable and more understandable for the public and for people who were coming in. And it was just, once again, a lot of fun, something different, something unexpected in the museum, and really working to engage people in that capacity. And then the third show I'm going to talk about is one that might look familiar to people. This is the newest show at Plains Art Museum that we just opened this past November, and this is Anne Labovitz's work. And Anne is an international artist based in St. Paul, Minnesota, so relatively local, and she works in the health and wellness sphere. And if you come to Plains Art Museum, you're going to start noticing that we're talking a lot about health and wellness and the connection from art to well-being, how it improves health outcomes, combats loneliness. There's really such a huge number of health benefits that I feel like we're just starting to explore now. And the most recent theme of the annual conference for the American Alliance of Museums was this idea of health and wellness. And it was a really interesting conference because they brought in hospitals to talk to art people, which is new, right? They had the Cleveland Clinic there, they had Mass General from Boston, they had the New York Manhattan Hospital System as well. And what a lot of people don't know is those wealthier hospital systems actually are major art collectors too. So the Cleveland Clinic has one of the biggest art collections in the world. It rivals some of the largest museums. And they're, I think, really cutting edge with how they're using art in their spaces to help patients and to help their staff too, because this is a two-part thing. Everybody can benefit from art, and everybody, can engage in different ways. And so their presentations were really interesting. The Cleveland Clinic in particular was talking about how they're now using visual thinking strategies with their pediatric patients. So they will actually take pediatric patients to go see an artwork, oftentimes one that they can identify with, and then using those sort of guiding questions to help them draw conclusions and increase their critical thinking skills. And it's not only a distraction, but it's also a means for them to experience art, to see themselves, to think of themselves in the future. It's really beneficial in that capacity. And for those that don't know, visual thinking strategy is a form of looking at art where the viewer is asked to make observations on their own without any guiding facts or data points. So they might look at a painting and how does it make you feel? What do you think the boy in the painting is doing? And then the viewer is able to draw their own conclusions. I personally have some mixed feelings about using visual thinking strategies because you can also go way, way, way off base when you're doing that. But I think for the purposes in the medical field that it's really beneficial. And you do see those improved outcomes. People spend less time hospitalized when they're exposed to art. Their healing time is quicker. It's really a wonderful tool. And it's also a tool that residents and physicians can use too for themselves, not just for patients. And I think that's important to think about also, how we can use these platforms for everybody in a holistic manner. So it was really inspiring hearing about the work that the Cleveland Clinic and Mass General and these Manhattan hospitals were doing. It's something I have dabbled in myself over the years. So my 5-year-old son is severely autistic, and it's something that, I started using art with him early on as a means of communication. And for me, it was very eye-opening. He's nonverbal, he can't communicate through words, but he uses visual imagery to communicate how he's feeling, how he's doing. And that inspired a lot of my earlier work in the health and wellness sphere and art. I actually was working on a 3-year grant, and I was at that museum in Virginia that specifically worked with neurodivergent communities using art as a means for communication. And it was in partnership with the local hospital system there. We did quantifiable data surveys, and it did show vast improvements in the ability to communicate socially for kids who did not have those verbal skills. So the proof is there. We know that this works. And one of the reasons I love Anne's work so much is because she's incredibly in tune with all of this research. She herself studied psychology initially and then got into studio art a little bit later on. And she recently just spoke at a neuroscience conference. She'll talk about that too. She says, I don't know why they invited me. I'm like, I do know why they invited you, but it's new that we're doing these things, that these collaborations are starting to happen. She's also spoken at the Mayo Clinic. She's installed work in health and wellness spaces across Minnesota, in addition to Terminal 2 of the Minneapolis International Airport. So her work is really being broadcasted in a lot of different ways and used in a lot of different ways. And I think that's a real testament to the type of work that she's doing and its universal appeal to people. Anne is very similar to Rebecca in that she did community sessions to create these pieces too. So once again, this deeper connection to the local community, really coming into a place, getting to know the residents, and then giving them something that reflects their concerns, their wants, their hopes, their desires, their dreams. And this piece is a testament to that. So Anne spent about a week here in Plains, and she conducted relational listening, or interviews as she calls them. So relational listening is a type of interview style where she would ask very open-ended sort of softball questions, and then people would respond to that, and Anne will sit and she will paint or she will draw while people talk, and she will capture words, themes, and emotions that she's hearing from them, and she incorporates those into the work. And it's interesting, I attended a few different sessions. I know some of us in the audience were in those sessions as well. And Anne says it's not so much about the questions that she's asking, but it's about getting people to talk, letting them feel heard, letting them feel like they've been able to share something about themselves and somebody has listened to that and, and given them that safe space to do so. And it's really powerful. People were leaving sessions in tears. She clearly had a tremendous impact in their lives in a very, very short period of time. And I think that's because we don't really have moments like that in our current culture. And once again, art can really serve as a platform to start having those conversations, having those moments. So this piece is a real testament to that, and this is in Plains Art Museum's atrium space. So for those who have known the museum for several years, we had a James Rosenquist up there for about 12 years. So this was the first time we did something new in that space, and I think you just feel that vibrancy, that energy when you walk in. And it's nice to have something bright and colorful, during the winter when it's cold and kind of dreary out too. So literally a testament to resilience. And if you look, you can see she's included words from some of the interviews within the work as well. And here's a shot of the installation on the 3rd floor at Plains. And all of the material, for the most part, is the same. So she uses Tyvek in her works, which is a construction material, because it packs up and she can ship it. So this crumpled piece over here is Tyvek, and then the hanging piece too is Tyvek as well. And once again, you see this bright imagery, you see the colors, but the themes are serious. They are about mental health, they're about resilience, they're about how we communicate with each other. And in a lot of ways, I view Anne as a conduit for having these conversations, because she doesn't live here. She's not actually part of the Fargo-Moorhead community, but she came and she got to know people, and she brought people together and created a community within the community now, and I think that's really special. Here's just a close-up of that piece too. And then this wall is an example of, once again, having something participatory within the gallery. And I hope everybody will come over and make a square at some point. But Anne created 10,000 hand-painted squares, so we've got plenty for everybody. And she invites people to respond to the prompt, what does wellness mean to you? And it's interesting. I go up to the gallery and there's some funny ones, there's some serious ones. I mean, there's the whole spectrum of how people have responded to this prompt. And it's just, once again, it's a means to communicate yourself individually in a gallery setting. And that's not something we saw 20 years ago. You couldn't walk into an art gallery necessarily and write something and put it on the wall. And we're seeing more and more of those types of interactive opportunities for people to reflect about the exhibition in real time. Statistically speaking, people spend under 10 seconds looking at a work of art. That's really, really fast. That includes like reading the label, taking a quick look, and then moving on. And you think that makes sense if you're thinking about, going through a full exhibition. You don't have the time to really engage with each piece necessarily. So opportunities like this give people time to pause and to reflect and to think and to respond. And therefore, they're embedding the work a little bit more in their psyche, taking it in more and being forced in a very kind way to respond and to really think about it on a deeper level, which is what this wall really functions as. It's a very simple gesture, but I think the impact of that is really profound. And then when you do walk into the gallery, even if you're the only one in there, you're surrounded by this community of people who have also participated in the work and have thought about the work, and that thread of connectivity really runs through. This show, really, we at Plains view this as the beginning or the kickoff of this idea of health and wellness in exhibitions in the museum sphere. We're actually going to be hosting a wellness symposium in April where we'll have public health officials, people who different surveys here in Fargo-Moorhead, like the Youth versus Behavior Survey, speaking about trends that they've seen within the community and issues that we are facing. And then we'll be talking about how art can help to combat some of those. So it'll be an open forum, an open conversation. I'm really excited about that. We've also been partnering with Sanford quite a bit. So we are seeing more and more partnerships with museums across the nation. A couple of the things that we've been doing with Sanford are, one big push actually is to install reproductions of our permanent collection artwork in the 2 hospital locations, Broadway, West Fargo, and the South Point Clinic, so that they do have art available. Sanford, unfortunately, is not an art collecting hospital like the Cleveland Clinic or some of these other hospitals are. They did admit that most of their art at the Broadway campus is from Michael's or Hobby Lobby or stores like that. So we are working with them to get some art that they can really use to model some of these visual thinking strategies, use with patients, and also for the staff to use. So at the West Fargo Hospital location, we're going to be installing artwork actually just in staff quarters as well, so people can have that exposure while they're going about their day-to-day shift. And we'll be rotating it so that people can see something new. It can be seasonally appropriate, but just giving that little perk of having art where you work, art where you're hospitalized. We've also been doing art kits in the pediatric intensive care unit. Elytra is here. She's been working with kids who are in intensive care and who are hospitalized for longer stays, so they have access to art kits. They can have that hands-on making opportunity. Then we are giving free family memberships for them to come over to the museum once they've been discharged too. So things like that, I think, once again, build community. They're offshoots of the exhibition. Elytra and her team too. I'm talking about you a lot, Elytra, but they just painted the IV infusion stools for kids over at Sanford too. So they requested flames, was like the #1 request.
Bubbles.
Yep.
Pizza.
I like the pizza one. Yeah. And I think that's just another great example of how art and health can intersect really simple gestures. I mean, it starts with a simple gesture. We want to build the partnership too, and we're also looking at Essentia and seeing how we can expand. But starting with something simple, bringing art into people's lives, and really using things like this as a launching point for doing so and spreading that. And that's something that we're really excited and proud about. We're actually going to be talking at a big nursing symposium at Sanford in the spring too. I mean, it's starting to heat up here, and I think that's a testament to the Fargo-Moorhead community too, that there is this interest and this openness to start piloting some of this new work as well. And like I said, Anne was the perfect artist to really kick this off with, but we're going to be modeling this type of work with other upcoming exhibitions as well. So really thinking about how we can collaborate, how we can bring people in and how we can keep up doing these types of interactive opportunities so when people do come into the museum, they feel welcome, they feel like they can participate, and they feel like they're really grounded from the experience, which is so important. And that is, I believe, the last of my slides and the end of the formal presentation. But I'm very happy to answer any questions or talk on anything you saw here or anything else. And yeah, go for it, guys.
Okay, so if you have any questions for Erin, and I know you will, just raise your hand so I can get you this orange-handled microphone so everybody can hear your question. Okay?
Erin, I think many arts organizations, and whether it's music or museums or even cultural type of organizations, are looking for young people. We tend to see mostly older people in these in the audience of various things like that. What kind of strategy do you think the Plains should take on to attract younger people?
That is a very good question, and I feel like that's a question that most arts organizations are asking themselves, honestly, because we are seeing, we do see that, we see that across the board, really. And so I think these types of strategies for engagement, I'm going to use Rebecca Louise Law as an example. When we're looking at doing workshops with her, we're specifically inviting groups that wouldn't necessarily otherwise be invited to come meet with her and to work with her, and oftentimes they do skew younger. I'm thinking specifically of like First Link, which is Suicide Crisis Prevention Line. They have a younger staff, and they met with both Rebecca Louise Law and with Ann Labovitz, so we actually linked them up with both of those two artists when they were in town, and they've since become repeat visitors, so that's been really great to see. Also thinking about making more fun opportunities. I use the word fun a lot when thinking about museum engagement and art because I think it should be fun. You can sneak in the academics, you can sneak in the cultural issues, that's all part of it, but you want it to be engaging, you want it to be lively, and you want it to be an experience. And that's what data is really showing too, that millennials in particular won't necessarily spend money on objects or things, but they will spend money and they will show up for an event or an experience. So that's something that we're really looking at growing. We're open late Thursday nights. We're creating more programming that is a little more off the wall, a little quirkier, that would appeal to younger demographics. But also just giving opportunity is very important. So thinking about high schoolers and undergraduates as well, and people who are interested in the arts. We have 2 teen programs, Northern Plains Summer Art Institute, which is for Indigenous youth and is a residency program where they come live and work at the museum for 2 weeks. Also Buzz Lab, which is our youth and teen initiative as well, which works with pollinators. And we're actually adapting both of those programs. They're really standout programs that Plains has done for almost a decade. Buzz Lab is over a decade old at this point, but we're looking to expand them into year-long programs as opposed to just summer programs. And the hope is to have a space for teenagers in particular to come into me and to have a cohort. So it's not just coming once to an event and that being it, but to really create more of this supportive cohort where people get to know each other and come and feel like they're also part of the museum. Thinking a lot too about undergraduate internships and how we can involve undergrads more so in museum work specifically. Danielle and I have been talking quite a bit about the collection storage move that we're going to have to do with our capital campaign. We're doubling our collection storage square footage, which is really incredibly exciting, but we're going to need a lot of hands and a lot of help. So we'll be looking to the 3 colleges to have students engaged to come work with us on that move, and that's going to be incredible hands-on museum experience for people as well. Hopefully fun too. It can be tedious work, but hopefully fun. But really giving opportunities and welcoming people in. And I think, when you're looking to engage young people, it's not just about having them come once. And I know, Sam, we were just talking about people come to like the gala and then they don't come again for the rest of the year. And they might not even know that they're in an art museum while they're there. And so it's really, I think, having these moments that are different, that are exciting, using AI, using tech, using these participatory experiences. So people say, oh, that was cool. And they're more engaged as a result of it. So that's really our hope, is we can grow some of those programming opportunities, give back to people too, where they're gaining something. We're not just asking for something from them, but they're gaining either experience, relationships, opportunity, and really helping push them forward too. You know, I view us as having a real responsibility, Plains Art Museum, because we are the only accredited art museum in the state of North Dakota, accredited through the American Alliance of Museums. And so I do think we have a responsibility to give people those opportunities because we are the only ones who hold that. And so we're really working to develop those programs too, so there are more opportunities for engagement across the board. Yeah, that was a great question. Thank you. Anybody else? All right, well, I'll plug a few other upcoming exhibitions while I've got the microphone. So, so Anne is up for quite a while, but the next artist to be coming up in that space is named Rourke Art Gallery, and he's a printmaker and a ceramicist, originally from Uruguay, although he's been a professor at SUNY New Paltz, I think going on 30 years. He's considered one of the foremost master printmakers working alive still today. He's now in his 80s because he can do every form of printmaking. I myself am not a printmaker, but I know how impressive it is to be a master at each and every form. He will be here for his show in August. It's going to be out for quite a while. He's got a huge body of work. So Danielle and the curatorial team are working on creating a traveling subset exhibition that will go to different locations throughout the community, one of those being the Rourke, which we're really excited about sharing some of those works. So once again, thinking about how exhibitions can be shared, can be more collaborative. You know, we don't need to gatekeep things. You know, this should be a collaborative effort to make this an arts community, to bring those opportunities in for the residents. So that's something that we're really excited about too, is thinking how we can really use our exhibitions to connect. You know, it's going to be at the Nemeth, so out in Lakes, and what was the other one, Danielle?
North Dakota Museum of Art.
Thank
Not
you.
confirmed.
Not confirmed. I'm talking out of pocket just a little bit, so sorry about that. Not confirmed yet. We're hoping to get the details nailed down. But I think that's an example too of how, you know, museums can work together, how we can use exhibitions too as launching points to create different types of relationships. And we're very, very open to collaboration in that regard too at Plains. You know, we want that. We want to be in conversation, in dialogue with everybody, because these are big initiatives. We're talking about trying to make art a safe space, make art a space for healing, and we need help to do that. We need buy-in from everybody, and so we're looking at different techniques to do so. I mean, we're installing work at West Acres, at the mall, really thinking about platforms that maybe are non-traditional for viewing art. But West Acres, if you've driven by there, there's not a parking spot in sight on the weekends. I mean, people are there. And so that's a great way to reach people too. Bring exhibitions to the people. You know, like I said, museums unfortunately have sometimes been viewed as elitist or inaccessible. So sometimes it takes bringing art to people to get them engaged too. And they might see something that they really like while they're Christmas shopping at the mall. And then they'll come over to the museum and see more. So thinking out of the box in that regard too, just thinking about reach all the time. So my opinion, that is what it's about. Art is for everybody. If you're not gonna come to us, we can try to come to you too.
You spoke about an artist from Wales, also an artist from St. Paul. How does geography factor into your thought process and, you know, tilling local soil versus bringing in different voices from outside?
It's a really good question too, and we talk a lot about that. So our goal at Plains is to ideally, if not always, at least in rotation, have an international, national, regional, and local artist on view. So we're hitting all of those points. You know, I think it's really important to give opportunity to local and regional artists as well. We don't want to ice them out. We have a gallery space, our Starry Bank Gallery, that is reserved primarily for local and regional artists, and that gallery turns over much faster, so that gives opportunity for people who do live in the region to exhibit their work at Plains. Our three main gallery spaces are generally programmed 3 to 4 years out, so it doesn't give us much flexibility. But the intent there is to really, once again, give access and give exposure to artists that you wouldn't otherwise be able to see here in Fargo-Moorhead. I grew up in upstate New York, and I felt very fortunate growing up that I could take Amtrak into Manhattan and be there in 2 hours and go to the Met and go to MoMA and see world-class art, and that was access for me, and that really inspired my whole career trajectory. And so when I think about what we can do for the community, to me it's about access, and it's about bringing in other artists too that you wouldn't typically be able to see in the region. You know, my goal for the museum is to have people from Minneapolis, from Sioux Falls, driving to Fargo to come see our shows because they're so cool and you can't see them anywhere else. And so it's really working to give like what the Walker Art Center with the Minneapolis Institute of Art gives to the public in Minnesota. We're trying to do that here in Fargo too. So a school kid who maybe doesn't have the means to go out to Minneapolis can walk over to the museum or come on a school field trip and see this incredible world-class art. So we really try to have an incredibly diverse exhibition schedule too, and you'll see that when you see what we are up to over the next couple of years. Also, I want to point out that we always have an Indigenous artist on view, which I think is really important too, because of where we are regionally and what we represent. We always do have a Native American artist, not necessarily from this region. Our next Indigenous artist is Jake Verbois from Santa Fe, New Mexico. So not from right here, but once again, just broadening that dialogue, broadening that conversation. And that's in part too because we can educate differently with every show we get. So Ann Labovitz very clearly ties us into health and creativity and those concepts. Rourke Art, his work is very much rooted in this idea of ecology and nature, so it gives us a platform to discuss those types of initiatives and bring in scholars and experts who can speak to that. And then Rebecca Louise Law, obviously strong ties to ecology and to preservation. So each show also is an opportunity for us to engage with different groups of people, different communities, different experts, and it really kind of fleshes out the work that we're able to do. And I think once again, it's fun. It's fun to learn something entirely different one year to the next. And our intent is for everybody to be able to see them represented in the galleries at one point or another. So we're not always going to have a full range, across the board, but next year we might have something that relates more specifically to an individual as well. So that's really our intent and our goal as we think about our exhibition programming.
So you've been all over the place over your career, which I think is very cool. But I was wondering, what are some niche considerations that you have to take into account, or challenges that you end up facing when you're designing an exhibit and figuring out who to bring in?
Yeah, really good question. Because you do have to take the regional community, into account when you're planning a show for sure, and different demographics are going to respond differently. We just had an exhibition prior to Anne called Full Disclosure, which was the collection of the Icy Gays. So Rob and Eric Thomas Sewell, formerly of mine at North Dakota. Unfortunately, they recently moved to Virginia. We were sad for them to leave the state. But they are gay collectors. They put that front and center. Their artwork is all queer and feminist-based artists. Some very big names from the New York and LA scene. Not your typical work here in Fargo. And honestly, we were not sure what the community response would be. We did get a few angry phone calls, not too many though, and people for the most part were respectful and enjoyed it and learned something from it, I think. But we did a lot of staff training before opening that show. We talked as a group, we talked about what our responses would be. We were careful with our marketing strategy, and I don't want to say careful, we were just aware with our marketing strategy of how things would be received. And I think, personally for myself, I don't want to shy away from things because of the community. I want to be able to have those conversations and dialogues in a way that's safe and respectful for everybody involved. But you do have to take different things into consideration. That Titian to Monet show that I shared with you guys in Virginia actually opened up the day after the state of Virginia passed a new law saying any type of nudity, including Renaissance paintings, you had to have written permission from a student's parent for them to be exposed to it. It was wild. We had a full slate of tours coming up with K through 12 students. We actually had to fabricate velvet curtains to put over the paintings when they came through, and we had the ones with nudes entirely blocked off, and we took them up through a freight elevator through the back of the building and walked them backwards through the show. It was insane and unfortunate that Virginia went in that direction, because I don't think seeing Renaissance painting is going to, kids don't care, honestly, with those kids. They really don't. They do not. But parents apparently do. So we had to adapt, and we had to adapt on the fly. And that's an example of how state law, honestly, can impact what you're able to show also. And then you get into different types of conversations if you're at a museum that's state funded too. And that's a whole different world and a whole different realm. Plains Art Museum is not funded by the state. We are funded very much largely through charitable gaming, which is specific to the state of North Dakota. but it does give us more latitude with what we can show, so we're not having to answer to state funders in any regard. I worked on a show in Ohio that dealt with issues of unhoused populations, and we were inviting unhoused individuals into the museum and working with them. We were working at food pantries, soup kitchens, things like that. You would think that that would warm everybody's hearts, but that was contentious in part too, that we were working with that community in an art museum. And so, that took some different type of legwork to make work. So I do think you have to be aware of the audience, but I don't want to shy away from things. And we do put our more, if you will, controversial shows on our third floor gallery. And that is intentional, so we can bring Fargo public students through the lower galleries. And if there is work that might be considered salacious or could cause issues, they're just not exposed to it. So we have to think about that too. And it means we always have to have an exhibition on view that's also appropriate for Fargo public school students or our K through 12 audiences. That's a great question. All right, guys.
Thank you, Erin.